Maria Santos wiped the same glass window for the third time that evening. The corporate headquarters of Henderson Global Industries stretched 40 floors into the Chicago skyline, and she had been cleaning these offices for the past 18 years. Her hands were rough from decades of work, her back ached from bending over mops and buckets, and her feet throbbed inside worn sneakers that had seen better days. But Maria never complained. She had learned long ago that complaining changed nothing. The fluorescent lights hummed above her as she pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the 38th floor. This was the executive level, where the air smelled different somehow. It smelled like money, like power, like decisions that affected thousands of lives. Maria had never understood what exactly happened in these glass-walled conference rooms, but she knew it was important. Important people wore expensive suits and spoke in serious tones about numbers that made her head spin. At 52 years old, Maria had accepted her place in the world. She was invisible here, a shadow that moved through these halls after everyone had gone home. Nobody looked at her twice. Nobody knew her name except for the other cleaning staff and maybe a security guard or two. She was just the janitor, the woman who emptied trash cans and scrubbed toilets and made sure everything sparkled before the executives arrived the next morning. But Maria had a secret that lived and breathed and dreamed in a small apartment on the south side of the city. Her secret was her daughter, Elena. Elena Santos was 24 years old, and she was unlike anyone Maria had ever known. From the moment she was born, Maria could tell there was something different about her child. Elena had looked at the world with curious eyes that seemed to understand things no baby should understand. She had spoken her first words at 9 months, complete sentences by 18 months, and by the age of 3, she was reading newspapers out loud to her mother. Maria remembered those early years with a mixture of pride and confusion. She herself had only completed 6th grade back in Guatemala before her family could no longer afford to send her to school. She had come to America at 19 with nothing but hope and determination. She had married young, to a man who promised her the moon but delivered only heartache before disappearing when Elena was just 2 years old. Maria had raised her daughter alone, working double shifts, scraping together every penny for rent and food and the occasional second-hand book that Elena devoured like other children devoured candy. The teachers at Elena's public school had noticed her gifts early. They used words Maria did not understand: gifted, exceptional, prodigy. They said Elena needed special programs, advanced classes, opportunities that Maria could not afford. Maria had cried alone in her tiny bathroom many nights, feeling like she was failing her brilliant daughter by being poor. But Elena never complained either. She had inherited her mother's quiet strength. While other kids played video games or watched television, Elena sat in the corner of their cramped apartment with library books stacked around her like a fortress. She taught herself French from borrowed textbooks. She learned German from an elderly neighbor who had immigrated after the war. She picked up Mandarin from the family who ran the restaurant downstairs, spending hours in their kitchen helping them prep vegetables, while absorbing their language like a sponge absorbs water. By the time Elena graduated high school, she could speak 7 languages fluently: English, Spanish, French, German, Mandarin, Arabic, Japanese. She had learned the last 2 from online resources and conversation partners she found on the internet, practicing late into the night while her mother slept, careful not to disturb the woman who worked so hard to keep a roof over their heads. Elena had earned a full scholarship to Columbia University. Maria had wept openly when the acceptance letter arrived, fat tears rolling down her weathered cheeks as she held the paper in her trembling hands. Her daughter, the child of a janitor, was going to an Ivy League school. It seemed impossible, like something from a fairy tale. Now Elena had graduated with honors and was working as a translator for a small firm downtown. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover her student loans and her share of the rent in the apartment she shared with 2 other girls. But it was honest work, respectable work, and Maria was proud beyond words. Tonight, as Maria cleaned the executive conference room on the 38th floor, she thought about Elena. Her daughter had called earlier, sounding tired but happy. She had been working late on some documents, legal contracts that needed to be translated into multiple languages. Maria did not understand most of what Elena described, but she loved hearing the excitement in her daughter's voice when she talked about her work. Maria finished wiping down the massive mahogany table that dominated the conference room. She had heard the executives call it the board room, though she was not entirely sure what a board was in this context. The room was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city lights below. Original artwork hung on the walls, pieces that probably cost more than Maria would earn in a lifetime. A small bar stood in one corner, stocked with bottles of liquor that had names she could not pronounce. She was about to leave when she noticed a folder sitting on one of the leather chairs. It was thick, bound with a rubber band, and marked with a red sticker that said, "Confidential" in bold letters. Maria knew she should not touch it. She should just clean around it and leave, but something made her pause. The folder was open slightly, and she could see papers inside, covered with writing in different languages. She recognized some Spanish words, some English phrases. There were numbers, too, lots of numbers with many zeros. Maria felt a chill run down her spine, for reasons she could not explain. She quickly finished her work and left the room, pushing her cart toward the elevator. 3 floors up, in the corner office that belonged to the CEO himself, Jonathan Henderson was having the worst week of his life. He sat behind his desk at nearly midnight, his tie loosened and his usually perfect silver hair disheveled from running his fingers through it repeatedly. Empty coffee cups littered his desk, and his eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. Jonathan Henderson was 63 years old and had built Henderson Global Industries from nothing. He had started with a small import business in his garage 40 years ago and had grown it into a multinational corporation worth billions. He had survived recessions, hostile takeovers, market crashes, and personal tragedies, but nothing had prepared him for this. The Kimura deal was falling apart. Kimura Industries was one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in Japan. For 2 years, Jonathan had been negotiating a partnership that would expand Henderson Global's presence in the Asian market. The deal was worth $30 million, and more importantly, it would secure the company's future for the next decade. Thousands of jobs depended on this deal going through. His legacy depended on it. But 3 days ago, everything had gone wrong. The translation company they had hired to handle the contract negotiations had made a catastrophic error. A key clause in the contract had been mistranslated, completely changing its meaning. What was supposed to be a mutual exclusivity agreement had been translated in a way that suggested Henderson Global would have no exclusivity rights at all. The Japanese team had been insulted, thinking it was a deliberate attempt to deceive them. They had walked out of the negotiations and were now threatening to cancel the entire deal. Jonathan had fired the translation company immediately, but the damage was done. He had tried to explain the mistake through his own interpreters, but something was lost in translation again. The cultural nuances, the delicate art of Japanese business etiquette, required someone who truly understood both the language and the culture. He had reached out to every major translation firm in the country, but none of them could guarantee the level of expertise he needed on such short notice. The Japanese delegation was leaving in 48 hours. If he could not convince them to give him another chance, the deal was dead. $30 million gone. Hundreds of jobs at risk. His company's future uncertain. Jonathan stared at his phone, willing it to ring with good news. But it remained silent. 4 miles away, in a tiny apartment on the south side, Elena Santos was also awake. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, reviewing the translation work she had completed that day. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. Elena loved this time of night. It was when she did her best thinking, when the world was asleep and she could lose herself in the beauty of language. Each language she spoke felt like a different person living inside her, a different way of seeing the world. Spanish was her mother's language, warm and melodic and full of love. English was the language of opportunity, the key that had unlocked doors her mother could never have opened. French was elegant and precise. German was logical and structured. Mandarin was ancient and profound. Arabic was poetic and mysterious. Japanese was subtle and beautiful. She thought about her mother often during these late nights. Maria was probably finishing her shift right now, pushing her cleaning cart through those gleaming corporate hallways, invisible to everyone but seeing everything. Elena felt a familiar pang of guilt. Her mother had sacrificed so much, worked so hard for so many years. And what had Elena been able to give her in return? A tiny contribution to rent, occasional dinners when she could afford it. It never felt like enough. Elena closed her laptop and walked to the window. The city stretched out before her, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Somewhere out there, people were making decisions that would change the world. Somewhere out there, her skills, her gifts, could make a real difference. She just needed a chance. She did not know it yet, but that chance was coming. It was coming in a way she never could have imagined, and it would change everything. The next morning, Maria arrived at her daughter's apartment looking more tired than usual. Elena noticed immediately. Her mother's eyes were puffy, and she moved slower than normal as she set down a bag of groceries on the kitchen counter. Elena made her mother sit down and brought her a cup of coffee. This was their routine on Maria's days off. She would come to Elena's apartment, bringing groceries she could barely afford, and they would spend the morning together talking and laughing and pretending that everything was fine. But today, something was different. Maria seemed distracted, worried about something she could not put into words. Elena asked what was wrong. Maria shook her head at first, claiming it was nothing. But Elena knew her mother better than anyone. She pushed gently, lovingly, until Maria finally spoke. Maria told her about the executive floor, about the tension she had felt in the air over the past few days. She described overhearing snippets of conversation between executives, worried voices discussing something called the Kimura deal. She talked about the folder she had found in the conference room, the one with documents in multiple languages and numbers with many zeros. She admitted she did not understand any of it, but she could feel that something important was happening, something that had everyone at the company nervous. Elena listened carefully. The name Kimura was familiar to her. She had read about Kimura Industries in business publications, knew they were a major player in the Japanese market. Her translator's mind started working, connecting dots that Maria could not see. She asked her mother more questions. What exactly had she heard? What names were mentioned? What languages were on those documents? Maria tried to remember. She mentioned hearing the name Henderson, the CEO. She recalled someone saying something about a translation mistake, a misunderstanding that had offended the Japanese delegation. She remembered seeing Japanese characters on some of the papers in that folder, alongside English and what might have been French. Elena felt her heart begin to beat faster. A translation mistake, a Japanese business deal, a major corporation in crisis. This was exactly the kind of situation where her skills could make a difference. But what could she do about it? She was nobody, just a junior translator at a small firm. The daughter of a janitor. People like her did not walk into the offices of billion-dollar corporations and offer to help. People like her were not taken seriously. Maria saw the wheels turning in her daughter's mind. She knew that look, had seen it countless times over the years when Elena was working through a problem. She asked what Elena was thinking. Elena hesitated. The idea forming in her head was crazy. It was presumptuous and risky and probably impossible. But it was also the only idea she had. She told her mother she needed to make some phone calls. Maria nodded, understanding that her daughter had seen something in this situation that she herself could not see. She trusted Elena's instincts. She always had. Elena spent the rest of the morning researching Henderson Global Industries. She read everything she could find about the company, its history, its leadership, its international partnerships. She found articles about the Kimura deal, about the potential partnership that would transform both companies. She studied the names and backgrounds of the Japanese executives involved, learning their histories and their reputations. By noon, she had a plan. It was not a good plan, exactly. It was desperate and unlikely to succeed. But it was a plan. She would need to get inside Henderson Global Industries. She would need to speak to someone in authority, someone who could listen to what she had to offer. And the only connection she had to that world was her mother, the janitor who cleaned their floors every night. Elena looked at her mother, who had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from her long shift. She felt a surge of love and determination. Her mother had given her everything, had worked herself to the bone so that Elena could have opportunities she never had. Now it was Elena's turn to give something back. She would find a way into that building. She would find a way to help save that deal. And maybe, just maybe, she would prove that the daughter of a janitor could change the course of a $30 million negotiation. The question was how. Elena picked up her phone and made the first of many calls that would change her life forever. The security guard looked at Elena like she had lost her mind. She stood in the lobby of Henderson Global Industries in her best professional outfit, a navy blue blazer she had bought at a thrift store and black pants that were slightly too long but looked decent enough with heels. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried a leather portfolio that contained her resume, her certifications, and samples of her translation work. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the lobby was busy with people coming and going. Men and women in expensive suits walked past her without a second glance, their eyes fixed on their phones or their destinations. Elena felt small standing there, painfully aware of how out of place she looked. The guard asked again why she was there. Elena took a deep breath and repeated her request. She needed to speak to someone in the executive offices about the Kimura negotiations. It was urgent. She had information that could help. The guard laughed. Actually laughed. He told her she could not just walk in off the street and ask to speak to executives about confidential business matters. Did she have an appointment? Did anyone know she was coming? Was she from another company? Elena felt her confidence wavering. This had been a stupid idea. What had she been thinking? She was about to apologize and leave when something caught her eye. A woman was walking across the lobby toward the elevators, talking rapidly into her phone. Elena could hear fragments of the conversation, and the woman was speaking Japanese. Without thinking, Elena called out to the woman in Japanese. Her accent was flawless, her words precise and respectful. She apologized for the interruption and asked if the woman had a moment. The woman stopped dead in her tracks. She ended her phone call and turned to look at Elena with wide eyes. She responded in Japanese, asking who Elena was and where she had learned to speak the language so beautifully. Elena introduced herself. She explained that she was a professional translator who specialized in Japanese business communication. She said she understood that the company was facing challenges with their Japanese partnership, and she believed she could help. The woman studied Elena for a long moment. Her name was Linda Chen, and she was the Director of International Relations for Henderson Global. She had spent the past 3 days in crisis mode, trying desperately to salvage the Kimura deal. She had contacted every translation service in the city, every Japanese business consultant she knew, but none of them had been able to repair the damage done by the original mistranslation. Linda asked how Elena knew about the Kimura situation. Elena hesitated for only a second before deciding to tell the truth. She explained that her mother worked in the building as a janitor. She had overheard conversations about the crisis. She knew it was unusual for someone to approach the company this way, but she genuinely believed she could help. Any other day, Linda might have sent Elena away. The whole situation sounded absurd. A janitor's daughter showing up in the lobby claiming she could save a $30 million deal? It was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not in real life. But Linda was desperate. She had exactly 31 hours before the Japanese delegation left Chicago forever. She had nothing to lose by hearing what this young woman had to say. Linda led Elena to a small conference room on the 15th floor. She ordered coffee and asked Elena to explain exactly what she thought she could offer. Elena spoke for 20 minutes without stopping. She talked about the cultural aspects of Japanese business negotiations that most American translators failed to understand. She explained the concept of face, of honor, of the subtle hierarchies that governed every interaction. She described how certain phrases that seemed harmless in English could carry completely different meanings in Japanese, how a single word could make the difference between respect and insult. Linda listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, Linda asked to see her credentials. Elena opened her portfolio and spread its contents across the table. Her degree from Columbia, her certification from the American Translators Association, letters of recommendation from professors and previous clients, samples of her work translating business documents, legal contracts, and diplomatic correspondence. Linda studied each document carefully. Her expression gave nothing away. Finally, she looked up at Elena and asked one simple question. Could she fix this? Elena met her gaze without flinching. She said she could not make any promises. She did not know exactly what had gone wrong or how deep the damage went, but she knew Japanese culture. She knew the language in ways that went beyond mere vocabulary and grammar, and she knew that the key to saving this deal was not just correcting the translation, but healing the relationship. Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. She spoke briefly, her voice urgent. When she hung up, she told Elena to wait. Someone would be down to see her shortly. Elena felt her heart pounding. She had no idea who was coming or what would happen next. She just knew that she had gotten further than she ever expected, and she could not turn back now. 15 minutes later, the door opened, and Jonathan Henderson walked in. Elena recognized him immediately from the photographs she had seen online. In person, he looked older, more tired. The weight of his troubles was visible in the lines on his face and the shadows under his eyes. But there was still a sharpness in his gaze, an intelligence that assessed Elena in seconds. Linda introduced them. Jonathan sat down across from Elena and studied her with the look of a man who had seen too many disappointments recently to allow himself any hope. He asked her to tell him her story. Elena spoke honestly. She told him about growing up poor on the South Side, about her mother working as a janitor in this very building for nearly 2 decades. She described how she had taught herself languages from books and neighbors and strangers willing to share their knowledge. She explained that she had no fancy connections, no wealthy family, no insider access. She was just a young woman with a gift and a desperate desire to use it. Jonathan asked why she wanted to help his company. What was in it for her? Elena considered the question carefully. She could have given a polished answer about career opportunities or professional advancement. Instead, she told the truth. She said she wanted to help because her mother had spent 18 years cleaning these floors, invisible to everyone who worked here. She wanted to prove that people like her mother, people who worked in the shadows, had value beyond their mops and their cleaning supplies. She wanted to show that talent could come from anywhere, even from the daughter of a janitor who had never finished 6th grade. Jonathan was silent for a long time after she finished speaking. Linda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, uncertain what her boss was thinking. Finally, Jonathan stood up. He extended his hand to Elena. He told her she had one chance. He would bring her into the negotiations tomorrow morning. If she could establish a connection with the Japanese delegation, if she could begin to repair the damage that had been done, he would pay her whatever the top translation firms charged and more. If she failed, there would be no hard feelings, but the deal would be dead. Elena shook his hand firmly. She told him she would not fail. That night, Elena barely slept. She paced her apartment for hours, reviewing everything she knew about Japanese business culture. She practiced phrases, rehearsed scenarios, anticipated objections. Her roommates had long since gone to bed, but Elena could not rest. Too much was riding on tomorrow. At 2 in the morning, her phone rang. It was her mother. Maria's voice was shaking. Word had somehow spread through the building about what had happened in that conference room. The security guard had told someone who had told someone else. By the time Maria arrived for her night shift, everyone was talking about the janitor's daughter, who had talked her way into a meeting with the CEO. Maria asked if it was true. Elena confirmed that it was. She was going to be part of the negotiations tomorrow. She was going to try to save the deal. Maria started crying. Not sad tears, but tears of overwhelming emotion, pride and fear and hope all mixed together. She told Elena she believed in her. She had always believed in her, from the moment she was born. Whatever happened tomorrow, Maria wanted Elena to know that she had already exceeded every dream Maria had ever had for her. Elena felt tears streaming down her own face. She thanked her mother for everything, for the sacrifices, for the long hours, for never giving up even when things were hardest. She promised to make her mother proud. After they hung up, Elena sat alone in the darkness of her apartment. The weight of what she had committed to suddenly felt crushing. This was not a practice exercise or a classroom assignment. Real money was at stake. Real jobs, real consequences. But she had been preparing for this moment her entire life, even if she had not known it. Every language she had learned, every cultural nuance she had absorbed, every late night spent studying when she could have been sleeping, had led her to this point. Tomorrow, she would either succeed or fail. Either way, she would give it everything she had. The morning came too quickly. Elena arrived at Henderson Global Industries at 7:30, a full hour before the meeting was scheduled to begin. She wore her best outfit again, but this time she carried herself differently. She walked through the lobby like she belonged there, like she had every right to be there. Linda Chen met her at the elevator and escorted her to the 38th floor, to the same boardroom that Maria had cleaned so many times. The room looked different in the daylight, the morning sun streaming through the windows and making everything gleam. Jonathan Henderson was already there, along with a team of lawyers and executives that Elena did not recognize. They looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Who was this young woman, and what could she possibly contribute to negotiations that had been handled by the best professionals money could buy? Jonathan introduced Elena to the team. He explained that she would be serving as their cultural liaison and primary translator for the meeting. There were raised eyebrows and exchanged glances, but nobody dared to question the CEO's decision. At precisely 9 o'clock, the Japanese delegation arrived. There were 5 of them, led by a man named Takeshi Kimura, the grandson of the company's founder and its current president. Takeshi was in his early 50s, with silver streaks in his black hair and eyes that revealed nothing. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had been raised to lead. Behind him were 4 other executives, each representing different aspects of Kimura Industries. Their faces were carefully neutral, but Elena could sense the tension in the room. These were people who felt they had been disrespected, who had been given a reason to distrust Henderson Global. Winning them back would require more than just words. The American team rose to greet their guests. Jonathan stepped forward to shake Takeshi's hand, but Elena moved first. She approached Takeshi and bowed. Not the casual nod that most Americans offered, but a proper Japanese bow, her back straight and her eyes lowered to exactly the right angle. She spoke in Japanese, her voice calm and respectful. She addressed him by his proper title, using the most formal, honorific language appropriate for his position. She apologized for the distress that had been caused by the previous misunderstanding. She acknowledged that trust had been broken and that words alone could not repair it. She asked only for the opportunity to demonstrate the sincerity of Henderson Global's intentions through their actions today. Takeshi's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He responded in Japanese, asking who Elena was and where she had learned to speak the language. Elena gave a brief answer. She said she was a translator who had devoted her life to understanding not just words, but the hearts behind them. She said she had deep respect for Japanese culture and for the Kimura family's legacy of excellence in manufacturing. The room was completely silent. The American executives watched without understanding what was being said, but they could feel the shift in atmosphere. Something important was happening. Takeshi studied Elena for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. He switched to English and addressed Jonathan directly. He said he was willing to continue the discussions, but only if this young woman served as the primary translator for all communications. Jonathan agreed immediately. The negotiations began. Over the next 6 hours, Elena worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She translated not just words, but intentions, not just sentences, but the subtle meanings hidden beneath them. When an American executive made a comment that could have been perceived as aggressive, Elena softened it without changing its meaning. When a Japanese executive expressed concern in a roundabout way, Elena made sure the Americans understood the directness behind the politeness. There were difficult moments. The original mistranslation had caused real damage, and the Japanese team was understandably cautious. Several times, Takeshi expressed doubts about whether the partnership could work. Each time, Elena responded with patience and honesty, acknowledging the validity of his concerns while gently pointing out the mutual benefits that both companies stood to gain. During a break in the afternoon, Takeshi asked Elena to walk with him. They stood by the windows overlooking the city, speaking in Japanese so the others could not understand. Takeshi asked about her background. Elena told him the truth, just as she had told Jonathan. She described her mother, the janitor who worked in this building. She explained how she had taught herself languages because books were cheaper than formal education. She admitted that she had no business being in this room, that by every normal measure, she did not belong here. Takeshi was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. He told her a story about his own grandfather, the founder of Kimura Industries. Before starting the company, his grandfather had been a factory worker, one of the lowest positions in the industrial hierarchy. He had taught himself engineering from borrowed books, working late into the night just as Elena had done. He had built an empire from nothing, proving that talent and determination could overcome any obstacle. Takeshi said that Elena reminded him of his grandfather. He said he believed her sincerity in a way he had not believed the sincerity of anyone else at Henderson Global. And because of her, he was willing to give the partnership another chance. Elena felt tears threatening to spill but held them back. She thanked Takeshi for his trust and promised that she would do everything in her power to ensure that it was not misplaced. They returned to the conference room, and the negotiations continued. By 7 o'clock that evening, the framework of a new agreement had been drafted. It was not the final contract, not yet. There were still details to be worked out, lawyers to consult, boards to approve. But the foundation had been laid, and both sides had committed to moving forward. When the Japanese delegation left, Takeshi paused at the door. He turned back to look at Elena and spoke in Japanese. He said that in all his years of business, he had never met anyone quite like her. He hoped they would work together again. After they were gone, The American team erupted in celebration. Executives who had looked at Elena with skepticism that morning now shook her hand and thanked her profusely. Linda Chen hugged her. Jonathan Henderson stood back and watched with a small smile on his face. When the room had cleared and only Elena and Jonathan remained, the CEO approached her. He told her that what she had accomplished today was nothing short of remarkable. She had single-handedly saved a deal that the best professionals in the industry had been unable to salvage. She had proven that talent and character mattered more than pedigree and connections. Elena thanked him, but said she had only done what anyone with her skills would have done. She had just been in the right place at the right time. Jonathan shook his head. He said it was more than that. She had something special. A combination of intelligence and empathy that could not be taught. And he did not intend to let that talent walk out of his building. He offered her a job on the spot, Director of International Communications, a salary that made her head spin, benefits that her mother had never dreamed of, a chance to help shape the future of a global company. Elena was speechless. She had come here hoping to prove herself, maybe earn a consulting fee. She had never imagined this. She asked for time to think about it. Jonathan told her to take all the time she needed, but the offer would stand. That night, Elena went to find her mother. Maria was on the 20th floor, emptying trash cans in a row of cubicles. She looked up when she heard footsteps approaching, and her face transformed when she saw her daughter. Elena told her everything. The negotiations, Takeshi Kimura, the job offer. Maria listened with wide eyes, her hands still gripping the trash bag she had been filling. When Elena finished, Maria did not speak. She simply wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her tight. They stood there in the empty office, mother and daughter, two women who had fought so hard for so long, finally seeing the fruit of their struggles. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be decisions to make, details to work out, a future to plan. But tonight, in this moment, there was only gratitude. Gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. Gratitude for each other. Gratitude for the simple truth that sometimes, against all odds, dreams really do come true. Elena did not sleep that night. She sat in her tiny apartment, staring at the job offer letter Jonathan Henderson had given her, reading the numbers again and again as if they might change. The salary was more than 3 times what she currently earned. The benefits package included health insurance for her entire family. There was a signing bonus that could pay off the rest of her student loans in one check. It seemed too good to be true. And in Elena's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She called her mother at 3 in the morning. Maria was still at work, pushing her cart through the silent hallways of Henderson Global Industries. When she heard her phone ring, she ducked into an empty stairwell to answer. Elena told her about the doubts swirling in her head. What if this was all a mistake? What if she took the job and failed? What if the Kimura deal fell apart anyway and everyone blamed her? What if she was not ready for this kind of responsibility? Maria listened patiently to her daughter's fears. When Elena finally ran out of words, Maria spoke. She told Elena about the night she had arrived in America 33 years ago. She had been 19 years old with no money and no English and no idea how she would survive. She had been terrified. Every day for that first year, she had wanted to give up and go home. Every day she had doubted herself. But she had not given up. She had kept going one day at a time, because she knew that the only way to fail for certain was to stop trying. And eventually, the fear had faded, not because anything got easier, but because she grew stronger. Maria told Elena that she would face doubts and challenges in this new job, just as she had faced them in everything else. The difference now was that she had proven herself. She had walked into that building with nothing but her talent and her determination, and she had succeeded. If she could do that once, she could do it again. Elena wiped the tears from her eyes. She thanked her mother and promised to call her in the morning. The next day, Elena accepted the position. Her first weeks at Henderson Global Industries were overwhelming. She had an office now, with a window and a desk and her name on the door. She had an assistant, a young man named Marcus, who seemed slightly terrified of her. She had meetings and conference calls and more responsibilities than she knew how to handle. The other executives watched her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Word had spread quickly about how she had gotten the job. Some resented her, convinced that she had somehow manipulated her way into a position she did not deserve. Others respected her but kept their distance, unsure how to interact with someone from such a different background. Elena focused on her work. She threw herself into the Kimura partnership, spending long hours reviewing contracts and correspondence, making sure that nothing was lost in translation ever again. She traveled to Tokyo to meet with the Japanese team in person, cementing the relationships she had begun to build. She learned the inner workings of Henderson Global, studying the company's history and culture and operations until she understood them as well as anyone. Slowly, the skeptics began to come around. They saw how hard she worked. They noticed how she treated everyone with respect, from the senior partners to the mailroom clerks. They watched her navigate complex negotiations with grace and intelligence, solving problems that had stumped more experienced colleagues. 3 months after Elena started her new job, the Kimura deal was officially signed. $30 million. A partnership that would reshape both companies for years to come. A success that the business press called one of the most important international agreements of the year. Jonathan Henderson threw a celebration at a fancy downtown hotel. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom, executives and investors and dignitaries from around the world. Elena wore a dress she had bought specifically for the occasion, the most expensive piece of clothing she had ever owned. She felt out of place among all these powerful people, despite everything she had accomplished. Part of her still felt like the poor girl from the South Side, pretending to belong in a world that was not meant for people like her. And then, she saw her mother. Maria stood in the corner of the ballroom, looking uncomfortable in a simple black dress that Elena had helped her pick out. She had never been to an event like this, had never imagined she would be invited to one. But Elena had insisted. This was her celebration too, whether she knew it or not. Elena walked across the crowded room to her mother. She took Maria's hand and led her toward the front, where Jonathan Henderson was preparing to give a speech. Jonathan saw them approaching and smiled. He stepped away from the microphone and met them halfway. He shook Maria's hand warmly. He thanked her for raising such an extraordinary daughter. He said that in his 40 years of business, he had never met anyone who combined Elena's talent with her character. Henderson Global was lucky to have her. Maria could not find the words to respond. She simply nodded, tears streaming down her face. Jonathan returned to the microphone and began his speech. He talked about the Kimura deal, about its significance for the company and its employees. He acknowledged the hard work of everyone who had contributed. And then, he did something unexpected. He called Elena to the stage. The room applauded as Elena made her way to the front. She felt every eye on her, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. Jonathan handed her the microphone and stepped aside. Elena looked out at the sea of faces. Executives and investors, lawyers and accountants, important people who made important decisions. They were all watching her, waiting to hear what she had to say. She began to speak. She told them about her mother. She described the 18 years Maria had spent cleaning their offices, the countless nights she had worked while the rest of the world slept. She talked about the sacrifices Maria had made, the opportunities she had given up, so that her daughter could have a chance at a better life. Elena said that everyone in this room was successful because someone had believed in them, had supported them, had given them a chance. For her, that someone was a cleaning lady who had never finished 6th grade but possessed more wisdom and strength than anyone Elena had ever known. She said that talent could be found anywhere, in any community, in any family. The daughter of a janitor could save a $30 million deal. The son of a factory worker could build an international corporation. All anyone needed was opportunity and support. Elena looked at her mother, standing alone in the crowd, tears still flowing freely. She said that this success belonged to both of them. Everything she was, everything she had achieved, was because of her mother. And she hoped that her story might inspire others to look for talent in unexpected places, to give chances to people who might not seem to deserve them. The room was silent when she finished. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jonathan Henderson began to clap. Slowly, others joined him. The applause built until it filled the entire ballroom, a thunderous recognition of everything Elena had said. Maria found herself surrounded by people wanting to shake her hand, wanting to thank her for raising such an impressive daughter. She did not know how to respond, could barely believe what was happening. After all these years of being invisible, she was suddenly being seen. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and the guests had gone home, Elena and Maria walked together through the empty streets of downtown Chicago. The city lights sparkled around them, reflected in the windows of skyscrapers that stretched toward the stars. Maria asked Elena if she remembered the first book she had ever read by herself. Elena laughed and said she did. It had been a battered copy of Charlotte's Web that Maria had found in a donation bin. Elena had read it 17 times. Maria said she had known from that moment that her daughter was special, not because she could read at 4 years old, but because of the look in her eyes when she finished the story. It was a look of hunger, of endless curiosity, of determination to understand everything the world had to offer. Elena squeezed her mother's hand. She said she had learned that hunger from watching Maria work, watching her push through exhaustion and disappointment and pain, never giving up, never accepting defeat. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. The night was cool, but not cold, and the streets were peaceful. Maria asked what would come next. Elena smiled and said she did not know. The Kimura deal was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more opportunities, more chances to prove herself. She would take them one at a time, just as her mother had taught her. But first, she said, there was something she needed to do. The next week, Elena submitted a proposal to Henderson Global's leadership team. It was a plan for a new scholarship program funded by the company designed to support talented young people from underserved communities. The program would provide educational resources, mentorship, and job opportunities for students who showed promise but lacked access. Jonathan Henderson approved the proposal without hesitation. He told Elena it was exactly the kind of initiative the company needed, a way to give back to communities that were often overlooked. The program launched 3 months later. Elena named it the Santos Foundation, in honor of her mother. The first class of scholars included 12 young people from neighborhoods across Chicago, each with extraordinary potential and nowhere to develop it. Elena spoke at the opening ceremony. She told the scholars about her own journey, about teaching herself languages in a cramped apartment, about walking into Henderson Global with nothing but hope and determination. She told them that their backgrounds did not define their futures, that talent and hard work could overcome any obstacle. Maria sat in the front row, watching her daughter address the crowd. She thought about all the years she had worried, all the nights she had wondered if she was doing enough. She thought about the dreams she had carried across borders, the sacrifices she had made, the silent prayers she had offered for her child's success. And she realized that this moment, watching Elena inspire the next generation, was worth every struggle. After the ceremony, Elena found her mother waiting outside. They embraced for a long time, neither wanting to let go. Maria told Elena she was proud of her. Not because of the job or the money or the recognition. She was proud because Elena had not forgotten where she came from. She had used her success to lift others, to create opportunities for young people who reminded her of herself. Elena said she had learned that from her mother, too. Maria had always shared what little she had with neighbors and strangers. She had taught Elena that success meant nothing if it was not used to help others. They walked together toward the parking garage, arm in arm. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Maria asked if Elena was happy. It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of everything they had been through together. Elena thought about it carefully before answering. She was not happy in the simple, carefree way she had been as a child. She carried responsibilities now, pressures that sometimes kept her awake at night. She knew that her success had come with sacrifices, that there were parts of a normal life she would never experience. But she was fulfilled. She was using her gifts for something meaningful. She was making a difference in the world. One translation, one relationship, one scholarship at a time. And she was doing it alongside the woman who had made everything possible. So yes, she told her mother, she was happy. 1 year later, Elena stood in the same boardroom where her journey had begun. The view through the windows had not changed, but everything else had. She was no longer the nervous young translator hoping for a chance. She was the director of international communications for a global corporation, respected by colleagues and partners around the world. Takeshi Kimura sat across from her, reviewing the final documents for an expansion of their partnership. The original $30 million deal had grown into something much larger, a comprehensive alliance that was transforming both companies. Takeshi looked up from the papers and smiled. He told Elena that he still thought about their first meeting, when she had bowed to him in perfect Japanese form and spoken words that had changed his mind about the entire partnership. He said he had never regretted giving her a chance. Elena thanked him. She said that chance had changed her life. She hoped she had proven worthy of it. Takeshi shook his head. He said she had not just proven worthy, she had exceeded every expectation. His grandfather would have liked her very much. They signed the documents together, marking another milestone in a partnership that continued to grow. After Takeshi left, Elena sat alone in the boardroom for a few minutes, looking out at the city she had grown up in. She thought about her mother, who had retired 6 months ago after 20 years at Henderson Global. Maria now spent her days volunteering at the Santos Foundation, helping young scholars navigate the challenges she understood all too well. She had finally stopped working, finally allowed herself to rest. And she had never been happier. Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, reminding her of her next meeting. She gathered her things and headed for the door, ready to face whatever challenges the afternoon would bring. As she walked through the hallways of the 38th floor, she passed the spot where her mother had found that confidential folder so many months ago. She paused for just a moment, remembering how unlikely everything had seemed back then. A janitor's daughter who spoke 7 languages, a desperate company facing a crisis, a chance meeting that had changed everything. Elena smiled and kept walking. There was work to be done. There were deals to negotiate, scholars to mentor, futures to build. The story that had begun in a cramped apartment on the south side of Chicago was far from over. But now, at least, it was heading somewhere wonderful. And somewhere in the city, in a cozy apartment filled with photographs and memories, Maria Santos was watching the sunset and thinking about her daughter. The daughter who had taken everything Maria had given her and turned it into something extraordinary. The daughter who had proven that where you start does not determine where you end up. Maria whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, the same prayer she had whispered every day for 24 years. And this time, as the golden light filled her home, she finally believed that every word of it had been answered. The story of the janitor's daughter had become legend at Henderson Global Industries. New employees heard it during orientation. Executives shared it with partners around the world. It reminded everyone that talent could come from anywhere. that the right opportunity could change a life, and that the people who clean our offices at night might be raising the leaders of tomorrow. Elena never forgot that, and she spent the rest of her career making sure that others would have the same chances she had been given, because that, she knew, was the real measure of success. Not what you achieved for yourself, but what you made possible for others. And by that measure, both Elena and Maria Santos were the most successful people anyone at Henderson Global had ever known.